Live.
Good evening and welcome to the July 2020 Board of Education meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our July meetings are a bit different than our typical meetings, as it is our reorganizational meeting where leaders in certain positions of the district are elected or appointed, and in addition, we give the oath of office to the superintendent and to the newly elected board members. So congratulations to our newly elected board members. Anna Levitan was reelected and Carol Chang was reelected, and Susan Falco, welcome, our newest member of the Board of Education. So the first order of business is for the oath to be administered to the newly elected trustees on the Board of Education. So Ms. Benjamin.
Yes, if you could please stand. Thank you. And if you just raise your right hand, please. You can hear me, right? Please state your name.
Carol Chang.
Anna Levitan.
Susan Falco.
Do solemnly affirm
Do solemnly affirm
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the position
the duties of the position
trustee
of
of board
trustee
trustee. Thank you. According to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next oath of office to be administered is for the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Rogers.
I, Thomas Rogers, do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the position of Superintendent of Schools of the Syosset Central School District according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Dr. Rogers. Okay, so the first item is taking nominations for board president. May I have a nomination? Carol?
I nominate Tracy Frankel.
Thank you, Carol. Are there other nominations? Tom Rotolo?
I nominate Chris Ulrich. And I'd like to speak on this for a second.
Sure.
So last year, I was a new board member, and our first meeting, I don't really know anybody. I don't know what the roles are, and we have to vote on this. And I think it's very difficult to vote on this if you really don't know any of the people, you don't know what the roles are, you don't know what they're going to do going forward, and I feel like it's a tough situation to come onto the board, not really know anybody, and have to vote on this your first meeting.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any other nominations? Okay, not seeing any other hands, that closes nominations. So the resolution is that Tracy Frankel would be elected to President of the Board of Education effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. May I have a motion for that nomination? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor?
Feldman,
Did you, oh,
Sean. I have Susan Falco, Carol Chang, Andy Feldman, Tracy Frankel, and Rob Gershon. Am I missing anyone?
okay, so any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Okay, so that motion carries. Thank you. We will next take nominations for Board Vice President. Andy Feldman,
I nominate Rob Gershon for Vice President.
are there any other nominations? Tom Rotolo,
I nominate Christy Filippo.
okay, so resolution number 2 is that Rob Gershon be elected Vice President of the Board of Education effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor?
Okay.
Fran, how many was that?
That's 5. Andy Feldman, Carol Chang, Susan Falco, Rob Gershon, and Tracy Frankel.
Are there any opposed? And are there any abstentions? Okay, that motion carries. Fran, will you administer the oath of office for the newly elected president and vice president?
Yes, please stand. Mr. Gershon and Ms. Frankel?
Yes.
Okay, great. Please raise your right hand. Please state your name.
I, Tracy Frankel,
Rob Gershon,
Do solemnly affirm
do
do
solemnly
solemnly
affirm
affirm
that I will support
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the
the
Constitution of the United
Constitution of
States
the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution
and
of
the
the State of New
Constitution of
York,
the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will
and that I will
faithfully
faithfully discharge
the duties of the position
duties of the position
of President, Vice President,
President
Vice President,
according to the best of my ability.
according to
according to the
my
best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next resolution is that Francine Benjamin would be appointed to serve as district clerk of the Syosset Central School District effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. May I have a motion? Christopher DiFilippo, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that motion carries, and congratulations, Fran Benjamin. Looking forward to working with you again. Resolution number 4.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Resolution number 4 is that Brian Cleary be appointed to serve as treasurer of the Syosset Central School District effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by? Any seconds? Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 5 and 6 can be taken together. They are the appointment of Donna Viola as District Deputy Treasurer and Central Treasurer. Extra classroom activity account effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2020. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 7 is that the board president, a member of the Board of Education, other than an officer, is hereby authorized to sign checks in lieu of the treasurer or deputy treasurer. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 8 is that the district carries a faithful performance bond. May I have a motion, please? I think that was Chris Ulrich's hand. Yes. Seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 9 is the adoption of policies of the Board of Education. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 10 appoints Mount Sinai South Nassau on an annual basis to provide services at school district chief school physician health related services group. May I have a motion, please? Anna Levitan, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions?
I had a question, Tracy.
Yes, I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't see.
That's
your
all
hand.
right.
Go
It's
ahead.
it's hard with the video.
There's lots of squares.
I thought at one time we had a person with a name, but this leaves it open without a name for the chief school physician. Is that because, wasn't it the former chief physician we had at Winthrop or went into a different practice?
Yeah, so, I'll answer that. So
Okay.
it is the same school physician, Dr. Ronald Marino. You'll see that he is proposed to be appointed in the very next resolution.
Okay.
Winthrop did end their practice of serving schools with a health capacity. And so Dr. Marino moved his practice to Mount Sinai. But it is the same school physician that we had this past year who has helped us obviously with this COVID crisis. He's just moved locations, but same physician.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I'm going to redo the vote just because everybody has now heard Chris's question and answer. All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Resolution number 11 appoints Dr. Ronald Marino as the medical director for the defibrillator program. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 12 appoints R.S. Abrams and Company as internal auditor. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Susan Falcove. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 13 appoints Serini Associates as claims auditor. May I have a motion, please? Anna Levitan, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 14 appoints Cullen and Zanowski as independent auditors. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Tom Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution numbers 15 through 29 can be taken together. They are annual appointments of the purchasing agent, assistant purchasing agents, residency officers, attendance officer, records access officer, records management officer, asbestos officer, and appointment of health and safety officer, chemical hygiene officer, 504 ADA compliance officer, Title IX coordinator, payroll certification officer to certify civil service payroll reports, school officer responsible for receipt, collection, and review of certified payroll records, school officer to direct the execution of budget transfers upon chief school officer's approval, transportation supervisor to recommend approval of employment of bus drivers to the chief school officer. Are there any questions? Oh, may I have a motion? Carol Chang, seconded by Anna Levitan. Now, are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 30 is the authorization for board members, superintendent, and designated staff to attend conferences and meetings. May I have a motion, please? Chris DeFilippo, I believe, and seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 31 is the appointment of faculty auditor, extra classroom activity account. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Susan Falcove. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 32 authorizes Mr. Charlie Cardillo to waive fees for the use of facilities. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Christopher DeFilippo. Are there any questions? Yes, Chris Ulrich.
Does this include fees related to security for use of facilities on weekends, after hours, etc.?
Yeah, it may in some cases. There are some longstanding arrangements that we have had with some groups, but in the past year, what we've done is we've asked those groups to pay for the cost of security. But on occasion, there may be a reason why it makes sense for us to provide the access to the facility. But for standing groups that are renting the facility, for lack of a better term, on an ongoing basis for ongoing sports or something like that, it doesn't waive that cost.
Are there any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 33 designates the banks for the district. May I have a motion, please? Christopher DeFilippo, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution numbers 34 and 35 can be taken together. They determine the board meetings, the budget meeting, budget hearing, annual district election, and vote declaration meeting. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 36 designates the official newspapers. May I have a motion, please? Anna Levitan, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 37 establishes petty cash funds for each district school and district health office. May I have a motion, please? Chris Ulrich, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 38 establishes the mileage reimbursement. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 39 authorizes the superintendent of schools to apply for grants. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 40 authorizes Mr. Charlie Cardillo and Dr. Patricia Rufo as signatories for the district. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Tom Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 41 appoints the law office of Ingram and Smith as attorney. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Tom Rotolo. Are there any questions? Mr. DiFilippo?
This appointment, is this part of the contract, or is this, is this part of the contract, the ongoing contract we have with them? Or does this extend the contract?
I believe this is an annual appointment. Mr. Gross is on the call. He knows the terms of the arrangement better than I do. Mr. Gross? You're muted.
Yeah, the school attorneys are appointed annually, and our underlying retainer arrangement is not changing.
Okay, but is the contract impacted? Does this extend your contract?
The appointment is, we were requested to submit our proposal for reappointment, which is continuation of the contractual arrangement in terms of fee structure that was in effect last year. There's no change, no increase.
Are there any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 42 appoints Oric Harrington and Sutcliffe as bond counsel. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 43 appoints Munistat Services as fiscal advisors. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 44 appoints H2M Architects as district architect. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution number 45 appoints Ms. Christine Payne as Data Protection Officer. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Christopher Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that ends the reorganization portion of our meeting. And we will now begin our monthly meeting of the Board of Education. And the first item is the public hearing, the district-wide school safety plan. Charlie Cardillo.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Very quickly, last Wednesday, we had 30 members of the school safety team attending the district-wide school safety plan meeting. Number of the highlights of the meeting included the fact we had great representation. Tracy was present. Allison Birch, our PTA president, was present. Our building administration for the 10 buildings had representation. Our cabinet, along with Michael Callahan representing the teachers, Joan Gonzalez, our lead nurse, and other aspects of who attended. We had 2 students involved. And on the committee, and one of the seniors at the end of the meeting, unprompted, gave a beautiful, uplifting closing to the meeting and talking about really the care that the adults provide for the students here. I mean, really quite inspirational and something that really was unplanned. It was just as we were going around and finishing up the meeting itself that ended up on a very uplifting note. We also had the good fortune, because of the relationship that Dr. Rogers and Adele Bavard have established in the school safety field. We had the good fortune to have present Peter LaDuca, the executive manager of school safety and training at BOCES. But really, he's well respected throughout the state. His input at the meeting was really always terrific, insightful. We had Steve Kukowski, who's been very actively involved with the Syosset district, as well as several other districts throughout the county. He represents Homeland Security, Nassau County Homeland Security. We had Officer Matt McCartan of the 2nd Precinct. Again, one of the key things that we see taking place here in Syosset. They've developed really a great working relationship with the 2nd Precinct. And then we also had Jack Randazzo, the Syosset Fire Department Superintendent. So in total, we had, we met for around an hour and a half. The chat, which becomes an integral part of these Zoom meetings. There were a number of really great comments and questions made throughout the meeting. Tomorrow, a notification will go out to the community related to the 30-day public comment period on the district-wide plan. And then on August 10th, it would be back to the board for adoption of the document that you have received, the 2020-2021 district-wide school safety plan. Quick summary.
All right. Thanks very much. And to reiterate, although we haven't had questions yet, because this hasn't been posted, we will be posting it when, tonight or tomorrow?
Tomorrow morning, I believe it'll be posted tomorrow morning.
Okay, and then there'll be 30 days for the public to comment on it before it is presented to the board for approval.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
I just one other comment. I just have to say that as a first timer back here in this role here in Syosset, it was quite impressive, really. The input that people made that day, from Dr. Rogers to Adele to Greg Hamilton to Joan Gonzalez, Officer Kukowski, LaDuca, and other people who provided significant input along the way. It made the meeting really very meaningful, those who attended and so on. So, and I thank you. And Tracy, you provided great input during the meeting, and even afterwards, we made one little tweak on an item that you had pointed out to us in the document. So thanks to you, and thanks to everyone who attended.
Thank you very much, and thank you for leading that meeting. Okay, the first item that we'll do is the approval of the minutes for the June 17th, 2020 meeting. If you were not at the meeting, feel free to abstain for this vote. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Gershon, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? Tom Rotolo, do you have a question?
Yes, I'm confused. Did we vote and then there was an issue where we voted and then we needed to vote again on it? Was that changed, or what's the process with that?
If we're approving the minutes, it means that
Yes.
you're approving what had occurred at that meeting on June 17th, 2020, that the minutes accurately reflect what had occurred. So if there are any questions with respect to whether there was an accurate depiction in the minutes, then you would raise that with a question or object to the carrying of the minutes.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the treasurer's report will be given by Dr. Rufo.
As indicated in the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end May 31st, 2020 was $111,421,485.76. It also shows that bank balances for all cash accounts were reconciled to the book balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreements and investment policy.
Thank you, Dr. Rufo. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Christopher DiFilippo, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Dr. Rogers, please give us your superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. So, and thank you, Charlie, and welcome to the team temporarily. And we'll undoubtedly benefit from your experience. So I wanted to go through at the last meeting, talked with the board about some initiatives that I'll undertake in order to continue to work on our inclusivity and diversity initiatives here at Syosset. I do think of us as a school district as being a leader in this space. I think we have a lot to be proud of in terms of the work that we have done over the last several years. And any organization has opportunities for improvement. And so whatever successes that we've had, we always have opportunities to do more. One of the things that I told you at the last board meeting was I had several initiatives. I want to just bring you up to speed on where we stand with those initiatives and share progress along a continuum. So notwithstanding, actually, let me take a step back. One of the things I do every year is I meet with groups of students. And just as I have a cabinet of officers in the district who advise me, I ask for a cabinet of students to advise me as well. And over the years, this has evolved a little bit. It used to be a group of students ranging from elementary all the way through high school. What we've done is we've stratified it now. So there's an elementary cabinet of students who are typically fifth graders, a middle school cabinet of students who are typically eighth graders, and then the high school student government representatives meet with me, and we try to do that twice in the fall and with each of the three, and then twice again in the spring with each of the three groups. And it's really an opportunity for me not only to just be in classrooms, but to have conversations with students where they reflect their student experience to me, and I have a sense of what's on their mind and what concerns them and what they're working on, what their hopes and aspirations for the district would be. One of the initiatives I reported to you last week was that I would create a fourth cabinet, and this would be a group of students who represent the leaders of clubs at the high school, and particularly clubs that are reflective of the diversity of the student body. So there are a number of these affiliation clubs at the high school, and obviously they all have groups of officers. It was difficult to rustle up kids because this happened after the school year had ended. But I was still able to meet with about 17 of these student leaders, leaders in clubs and leaders in student government generally, and get some feedback from them. Ultimately, what I was trying to gauge is what their experience is as a student in Syosset, and particularly for students who would consider themselves to be of color, what that experience is like for them in the school, and to get some feedback from them. It was a very candid conversation. They were very candid with me. They were very frank. Some of the students indicated that their experiences had been almost universally good, and other students indicated that they had had experiences that they were unhappy and displeased with. So I wouldn't expect otherwise. I would expect that there will always be some students that would see opportunities for us to improve. And obviously that's the reason for having this conversation, is to get their feedback so that we can improve. We asked a series of questions, prompts to try and tease out a little bit of what their experience was on a daily basis. And it was a 90-minute conversation. I'm going to try and condense that into about 90 seconds, understanding that I'm not going to do it complete justice. But one theme that came out was that students do feel a little isolated. They use the term, and I've heard this before, the Syosset bubble, and they felt like they wanted more exposure to things that were going on in larger society and civic issues that they felt needed to be a little bit more front and center, not just in the school experience, but even in the curriculum. The second thing they talked about were the friend groups that they keep, and their own observation that even for themselves, their friend groups were not as diverse as the student body as a whole. And they recognized that on the one hand, there was sort of a natural tendency to find other students with whom you might have shared experiences, but they also recognized that there was a loss in that, and the ability to make friends and a more diverse group of friends was something that they would value. And so there's an opportunity for us to think about ways in which the school district can help foster that. We asked them about their daily experience, and bullying, sometimes, obviously we do a lot of work on bullying, and the state with the DASA reporting has made an emphasis on bullying over the past number of years. When these bullying experiences are linked to something that is a factor about an individual, sometimes it's called microaggressions. And so we talked with the students about their impressions of that, whether they experienced them seldom or more often. And some students, again, experienced them very seldom. Others said that they found it to be a more present part of their experience. For the students that did feel it to be a more present part of their experience, they said that often it would be the kind of thing that would erode self-esteem or self-confidence. Obviously, we don't want bullying of any kind, and we certainly don't want students to see their self-esteem or their self-confidence erode. And so we have more work to do to understand that a little bit better and to see how we can be supportive. They did recognize a number of the efforts that the district has made, but they also recognize that because a lot of those opportunities for students are voluntary, they tend to attract students who are already, let's say, open-minded or concerned about these kinds of issues and aren't necessarily reaching all students. And their question for us was, is there a way, how would we do a better job of reaching more of the student body to sensitize them to some of the issues that might go unnoticed if they weren't having these conversations. Some of the students felt that the efforts that we were making were, they found them to be a contrast to other things that they saw as being, that they were critical of, things like the Mascot, things like their perception that we had a Eurocentric curriculum, their perception that the staff was not as diverse as the student body. And finally, I asked a question because ultimately all of the adults here are to support all of the kids here, and we want all kids to have a great experience, and we want all kids to know that the adults are here to help them. So I asked if there was, if every one of the kids had an adult they felt they could speak to. And all of the kids said yes, but many of the kids said yes, but. And it's not uncommon for students to say, in schools, to say they don't trust adults to solve some of the problems of bullying. You'd certainly hear that in middle school. There's a fear of bringing something to the administration, and that the worry is that the administration might not handle it deftly enough, and that there might be some sort of a social price to be paid. And I heard that a similar theme here, where the yes but was, it would be hard to raise issues of microaggression because they're either not sure that the adult would know how to handle it, or they're not confident that the adult would handle it in a way that made things better. And so the sense would be that it's many times it's easier to just sort of let something go by. So I will say that I was really appreciative of the students' candor. I was appreciative that for a couple of the students, this seemed to be very raw. And I was also appreciative that they were offering suggestions for things that we could do that they felt would make us a more inclusive place than we already are. And so, again, I do think of Syosset because I have the opportunity to work with my colleagues and talk to my colleagues. I do think of Syosset as a leader in this space, but even leaders have opportunities for improvement. And I was very glad I put this conversation together with the students. Very glad to get their feedback. And one of the questions they asked at the end was, is this going to be the only time we meet and talk about these subjects? And I said, no, it's my intention to make this an ongoing part of my regular annual cycle. So hopefully from that will come even more ideas and more feedback from them. So along the same veins, last month I announced that we would be doing some summer curriculum work. Ms. Bavard has started to work on getting that together, working with our teachers to identify some additional lenses that we could put into some of the existing curriculum that we have to enhance it a little bit. And we're working on the professional development that we'll be doing doing for staff at the end of the summer, just before we come back. And we're looking for partner organizations who work in the social justice space and have some experience doing this. We haven't settled on any yet, but we do believe that there are some really good opportunities for us to partner and become better as an organization as a result of their expertise. Moving on to the reopening report. Obviously, I reported last month on where we stand with our own internal work, trying to prepare for reopening in the fall. A couple of recent developments of note. Today, the President of the United States held a schools-focused meeting on reopening and indicated that he was going to strongly encourage states to reopen schools and reopen schools for not just partially in terms of, an alternating day or a half day sort of model, but encourage schools to open for a full day, if at all possible. The governor also, Governor Cuomo, New York's governor, this week also made an announcement about schools. He indicated that he's reserving the decision about reopening schools to himself. That's not unexpected. He did that earlier in the spring. There was a conversation about New York City's plans, and the governor wanted to emphasize that the decision would still be his. And again, New York City has started to put out some of their plans, and the governor, I think, is also responding to that. In May, the governor had said that he would issue guidance to schools in early June for how we would go about reopening in the fall. And from that guidance, we would develop our plans. So the guidance that was promised for early June has still not arrived. My own supposition is that given the change in the trajectory of sickness in other states, that the governor may be waiting to see if other states begin to bring the virus back under control again. That may influence, because we are all part of one country, and may influence how much risk we feel we can tolerate in New York with reopening in the fall, and whether we're able to maintain what appears to be a good trajectory with controlling the disease here in New York. So we have not gotten the guidance yet. What we've tried to do is look at various models and not decide on any one of those models, but instead look through the pros and cons, first from a learning perspective and then from a logistics perspective. What's doable, what isn't doable, what might work best for students, what would be within our capacity to do. We've been using the school's architects. They've been going through every room in every building and taking measurements. Obviously, we have floor plans, but trying to figure out if there is space that can be repurposed so that there could be more students in schools, even if they have to be socially distanced in classrooms. That work is almost complete with the architects. We've been working with our transportation people to figure out how to do routing. We don't know what the capacity of buses will be, because we anticipate that will come to us in the guidance that we're anticipating from the state. We don't know exactly whether or how social distancing will be required in schools. So we've certainly seen from other parts of the world, people using things like plexiglass to shroud students from one another. Unclear right now whether that's going to be part of the guidance that is given to states. There are some things that are, we think, likely to be part of any reopening scenario. And so we've been working on those. Certainly hand washing, the ability to disinfect hands, having disinfection stations, minimizing the movement of staff and students through the building, minimizing the interaction where possible. Obviously, all of those things are around trying to reduce risk, mitigate risk. One of the things that we know is that we cannot eliminate risk altogether. Our job is going to be to try to minimize risk as much as we possibly can. So it's hard for me to say when our plan will be done, The governor in his remarks said that all schools have been ordered to develop plans. That much is true, but much of what we need to put in the plan is dependent on some decisions being made by the state. So until that guidance comes, hard to say where we're going to land in terms of the plan. So again, our job has been to do as much pre-work as we possibly can, because I do anticipate that when the guidance does come out, we're going to want to move quickly so that we maximize the time that's remaining in the summer to plan for whatever that eventual reopening looks like. And we've just looked at, scenarios that we've seen in other parts of the country, in guidance from other states. We are doing observation of the guidance that is being promulgated by Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, other parts of the country, to look for anything in there that we want to make sure is going to be part of our plan. But until New York makes some decisions about what's going to be expected, we're going to continue to work on the learning aspect, but we'll really need some guidance from the state. My understanding is that the Board of Regents is doing a parallel effort to the governor's effort in developing their own guidance to schools. And it is also my understanding that they have announced that they anticipate being done with their guidance next Monday. So unclear to me yet whether the governor's guidance is going to come out simultaneously with that, or maybe just before or just after. But I do anticipate that at the very least, once the Board of Regents guidance comes out next week, that we'll probably move into high gear trying to digest that guidance and then overlay it against our plans. Did get some questions. I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, but I'll just mention it again. We've been taking advantage of existing district committees, the District Safety Committee, which Mr. Cardillo has been leading, the standing elementary curriculum work group and secondary curriculum work group. And then there's a standing athletics advisory committee that's been working through some of the athletics questions. And I should linger on that for a moment. The State Athletics Association has put out a list of 6 potential options for how they might reopen in the fall. It won't go into all 6 of those options. One option is to just come back to normal. So, that may be unlikely. The other 5 options are various different permutations on whether you might want to do something regionally. And if you abandon, say, the state championship, then different regions would not be bound by the same seasons. And that might provide regions that are at different phases in the reopening to approach sports differently. Another idea would be that in the fall, while we know that there is still some virus circulating, to do less risky sports that have less contact, and then save sports that have more contact and are therefore more risky to the spring. That might be that it might include flip-flopping seasons, although the downside is that there may be 2 sports that normally are not in the same season that find themselves in the same season, and then a student athlete might have to choose between them. So all of those ideas are in circulation. None of them have been decided. Again, my supposition is that the athletics, the State Athletics Commission is not going to be able to make any decisions until the governor's guidance comes out as well, but they are putting these scenarios out there and taking feedback on them. Lastly, I'll just report that we did get reports last week on the Syosset landfill and Cyril Wire properties from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. The reports to us, my letter to them, their response to my letter have all been posted to the district website. We asked our environmental engineers and consultants, Walden, to evaluate the reports. They have evaluated the Syosset landfill report and concur with the DEC's assessment there. And they are in the process of reviewing the brownfields fact sheet and backup documentation for the Cyril Wire property. That documentation runs to 10,000 pages. So they're not done with that work yet. But based on the initial report from the Department of Environmental Conservation, it looks like the property has contamination that would not allow it to be used for residential and would require some additional cleanup under what's called the state's brownfield program. So last evening, I received a response from the district's letters from the last board meeting. Well, from one of the letters. At the last board meeting, you asked me to write 2 letters having to do with the Amazon property, potential Amazon development on this property. One was to the Nassau County IDA, asking that the Nassau IDA not offer tax incentives that would come at the expense of Syosset taxpayers. That letter has not been replied to yet. The second letter that you asked me to write was to the town of Oyster Bay, reiterating the board's position from 2018 that if there was to be development on the property, that there should be independent testing prior to that development. I did receive a response from the town last night. I just want to, I don't want to read it. It's 3 pages, single spaced. We'll post it on the website tomorrow. I don't want to read all of it. I'll just pick out a couple of parts and then let people read it for themselves. In the first paragraph, they say, we've received recent information and decades of testing that has been performed and substantiated by recent third-party certified experts. They note that at the former Zero Wire site, the applicant is proceeding with the brownfield cleanup program that I mentioned earlier. The environmental investigations conducted at the site over the past 30 years have generated sufficient data to define the nature and extent of contamination in soil, groundwater, and soil vapor, qualitatively assess the potential exposure of receptors to site contaminants, and support the development of a remedial action work plan. And then later it says the Department of Environmental Conservation will provide another fact sheet on the remedial work plan. There's a 45-day public comment period on the remedial action work plan, and the State Department of Environmental Conservation then has the option to conduct a public hearing, which would occur prior to the close of the aforementioned 45-day public comment period. And then lastly, in terms of what may be in store, trajectory-wise for the property, they say, we now expect the applicant, Simon Properties, for this project to ask for no variances from our town code or any request for a change of use for the property from what it's zoned for. With no residential construction planned and no soil disturbance at the former landfill, the developer will move forward with brownfield cleanup program at the site under the jurisdiction and meeting all requirements of the State Department of Environmental Conservation and State Health Department. The proposed project, an Amazon warehouse with 650 jobs, falls within the current zoning requirements for the property and therefore requires no town board approvals at this time. And lastly, they say environmental jurisdiction over the brownfield cleanup program of this privately owned property comes solely from the state. So again, I didn't want to read all of it. I tried to pick out relevant parts that I think are at least reflective of what the board can anticipate from the town and from the next steps with the potential redevelopment of this property. And we'll post this again on the website for someone to find any of these things having to do with this property. If you go under the Board of Education tab, there is a link to Syosset Park and all the work that the board and the district have done on the Syosset Park potential development, the Zero Wire, and former landfill properties. All of that can be found there, including our recent letter to the town and now the town's response to us. So obviously we'll continue to work on this. I've sent this response to Walden Environmental Engineering for their assessment. I expect to hear back from them in a day or so. And obviously I'll share anything of note with the board that we learned from that.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. It sounds like what the town is saying is that they no longer intend to perform independent testing in light of the decades of data that they've received from the DEC and other entities. And so I'm wondering if in the remainder of the letter, they indicated what changed between their initial determination that they would have independent testing despite the decades of testing and today.
I'm reluctant to speak for the town because I don't want to put words into the supervisor's mouth. So there's nothing that I read in the letter that is directly on point to answer your question that I could quote from.
Okay.
So I would just say that I would prefer to put the letter on the website and let people who read the letter draw their own conclusions from it.
Okay. Are there any questions for Dr. Rogers on the superintendent's report? Christy?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Dr. Rogers, couple of things. One is, I thought I heard that in one of the correspondence for the Syosset landfill and former CRO wire properties, that housing was not allowed because of the fact that it's it needs a brownfield cleanup program. And the other question is, and I don't know if you could answer it, but a lot of people are floating the word and the phrase around brownfield cleanup program or remediation. And they use it like loose change, like everybody knows what it is. Okay, it's a certain project. And, you know, I have here that brownfield remediation is the removal or sealing off of those contaminants so that a site may be used again without health concerns. So who's doing that, and what is the project? I mean, where do we find out in the community about who's doing this and what's involved with that project, rather than just say it's a cleanup?
Yeah, so I'll do my best at answering this question with the understanding that I'm certainly not expert in any of these matters, and be happy to have, if it's the board's pleasure, have Walden come and report to you at the next board meeting. Obviously, they have more subject matter expertise. What I do know is that the Brownfields program is a program of the state of New York. It is a part of the Department of Environmental Conservation. And the idea behind the program is that you would be able to redevelop sites that once had contamination, once you're able to remediate that contamination, and then the land would be usable for other purposes. So and this is my understanding, and if my understanding is mistaken, I'll stand corrected in the future, but it's my understanding that the zero wire property went through the Brownfields program once already a number of years ago. And at that time, the requirements were not as stringent as they are today. So the property is, again, as I understand it, met the standards that were in place at the time it went through the Brownfields program the first time, that there was substantial remediation done to the site to get it to a certain level of contamination. But now that they're going through the Brownfield program again, the levels of contamination are much more stringent, and so more remediation needs to take place in order to meet the new standards. But what I alluded to was that the existing standards are too stringent for residential construction there. And again, if you ask me the follow-up question, what's the difference between residential or commercial? I don't know the answers to any of that. It's just my understanding of the history. My understanding of the Brownfields program is that it is supervised by the State Department of Environmental Conservation, but how they select the actual contractor to do the remediation, what the remediation plan looks like, who develops the remediation, the remedial action work plan. I'm not entirely clear on whether that's done by the developer and then approved by the State Department of Environmental Conservation, or if they have some sort of a template that has to be followed. I don't have the answers to that, but I'd be happy to go research it for you.
Right. And, you know, Dr. Rogers, that, you know, the obvious is that we all need to know that on the school board as well as the superintendent, because it's right next to two schools. So we got to know what the involved with that cleanup is, if it has any adverse effect to the students and the staff.
Absolutely. And that's what we wrote in our letter to the town supervisor. We indicated, and this is based on the report that we did in 2018 when Syosset Park was still a viable option. We observed that there was, during the construction process, the potential for construction dust and debris to become airborne. And we wanted to make sure that that airborne dust didn't find its way to any of our properties. And we also noted that there's a substantial likelihood of stormwater runoff. That was another potential pathway for materials to leave the site, and we wanted to understand how stormwater runoff would be controlled. So in my mind, at least, I don't have an answer to those two questions, and I won't feel comfortable until those questions have been answered to, at the very least, the satisfaction of our environmental consultants.
Thank you.
Chris Ulrich?
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Rogers, actually, two questions. First, you mentioned potential changes to the curriculum based on what's currently happening. I know we already have a very diverse community. We focus on a lot of cultures, and we're already teaching a lot about a lot of people in a lot of backgrounds, nationalities, religions, etc. And it's great. I support it. But with everything that we're seeing in the media, social media, there have been calls for very radical or political curriculum designed by certain groups serving their interest, advocating for a particular viewpoint. A lot of parents have reached out to me concerned, what's going on? How is the district reacting? Are we following the herd? Are we getting away from real traditional education, fact-based, historic-based, and moving more towards what they've called right thinking or indoctrination or whatever? So how can we assure the community that while we're sensitive and, you know, we are teaching and we're going broad with, you know, teaching kids about diversity in different groups and different cultures, that we're not jumping on the bandwagon, you know, we're not being driven by social media and a lot of the radical voices you're hearing, whether it's left or right or from wherever, who are just advocating so loud for certain things that, you know, we're staying grounded and really focused on education.
Well, that curriculum work is being done by Syosset teachers. So, you know, I have a lot of confidence in our Syosset teachers. I have a lot of confidence in their ability to identify places where our curriculum can be enhanced, but I don't think that there's anyone that's going to, you know, indoctrination is a really strong term. Hard for me to imagine that we would find ourselves in that place. But I do think that, you know, there are, to your point, fact-based events in history that probably need to be teased out a little bit more and examined in the curriculum. And we should be talking about historical events, examining those historical events, contextualizing those historical events, but not necessarily making meaning for students, but providing them with information to make meaning for themselves.
Right. And I have all the confidence in the teachers, but one of the questions I've been asked and I can't really answer well, and I'm sure you can, is where does the curriculum come from? You know, they hear things, Common Core, or this learning system, that learning system. As these curriculums are being developed and redeveloped, is it at the district level, the building level? Is it at the individual teacher? Is it an outside program that we're bringing and adopting? Where do these curriculums come from?
I'll let Ms. Bavard go into this in a little bit more detail, but I would say that it's different for every type of program. Mm-hmm. So the district has, particularly at the elementary level, a reading program that we take advantage of. It's highly regarded. It's put out by the Reading and Writing Project, which is kind of an arm of Teachers College. They provide us with a lot of books and material. We select from among those. They give us pacing guides and units of study. And those units of study are designed in a way so that they build on each other. Common Core is kind of a misnomer. Obviously, it's had a rocky history. What the state did was the state put together a series, now many years ago, probably close to 10 years ago, a series of standards that needed to be achieved at each of the grade levels. And then the state also recognized that some schools and districts probably did not have an adequate curriculum to reach those standards. And so they put a lot of curriculum materials online. They, I think, were intended to be examples of curriculum, not to be the curriculum. But I do know that there are districts that took those resources, downloaded them en masse, and then just started replacing their own work with that. Syosset did something far more thoughtful. which was look at the curriculum that we had. And this was before my arrival, but it accelerated in my first few years here, and look at the learning standards that students were expected to meet, and then make sure that we had lessons that led kids towards those learning standards. So a couple of years ago, particularly again at the elementary level, we did a report card redesign, and that report card redesign gave our teachers the opportunity within these state standards to identify what they consider to be power standards, the standards that are most important to be foundational to build on for successive years. And so we wanted to identify them so that we could make sure that we had what we call scope and sequence, or spiraling, so that they would build on each other. And so that as we were giving feedback on the report card, that there would be a regular level of progression along some of these standards that are the same standards stranded up through multiple grade levels. At the secondary schools, a lot of the courses, if they are a Regents course, the curriculum is designed around making sure students are prepared for a known assessment at the end. The Regents exam is kind of a known quantity, and so you're building towards what you think or know will likely be on the exam. And again, the state publishes guides for what's expected to be known for each of those Regents courses. For elective courses, a lot of those curriculum we build ourselves. And maybe Ms. Bovard, you can, I think I've gotten the 3 big buckets, but if you want to go a little bit deeper into any one of those buckets.
Yeah, you did a great job, Dr. Rogers. So the next generation standards from New York are the broad guidelines that we use in Syosset. Our teachers do quite a bit of work with this. As Dr. Rogers gave the example of the standards-based report work that we did at the elementary, we'll take each content, we'll look at what the next generation standards have to say, and then our teachers collaborate, grade level, department, and really build that curriculum, that rich experience for the Syosset student. We look at best practice in the field. We look at the assessments. Some of them are predetermined, some of them we can create. And we really design that experience at each level, but then the work of the system is to look at the student experience from kindergarten, that key transition from 5th to 6th, the key transition from 8th to 9th, make sure that all of the experiences that the students have in curriculum spiral and connect to each other as they go through our system.
There's a lot of mechanisms at work, a lot of people working hard, and I appreciate that. You know, and again, just echoing the concerns, I hear that, you know, they want to make sure we stay on track and focus, because there is so much political noise out there and viewpoint and this and that. And, you know, it's great to educate. And I think we've got one of the best education systems out there. And, you know, the ongoing concern is how do we continue it? And unfortunately, you know, with these virtual meetings, no audience to the public, it's hard for people to express. So of course they're reaching out to us, asking questions. And Dr. Rogers, just one quick follow-up. You were talking about the governor and the remote learning scenarios. And I know we had discussed several months ago, hopefully school reopens, possibility of closure, possibility of a hybrid of a mixed scenario based on distancing and other factors. Have we looked at a scenario where we're going to have families where even if school is open, or if school is partially open and some kids and some are out, that there's going to be some families that want to keep their kids home. They're not comfortable sending them into the building and they want them to be in that virtual environment. Are we going to have the capability to support that? And especially in these hybrid modes, and I know we talked about making sure the teachers have the technology, we have the webcams, we have document cams, we have other things to better support the distance learning if it happens again. Are we going to be able to support kids and families where, you know, out of concern for the virus, they don't want to come in, but obviously they have to continue their learning?
Right. The short answer is I hope so. And I would rather give you a much more definitive answer, but this is a place where we're dependent upon some additional guidance from the state. The way the law is structured right now, a parent who does not send their child to school has to register them as a homeschooled child. And then we're literally not allowed to provide services to homeschooled children. So it's hard for me to imagine that the state would not recognize that an option needs to be made for parents to keep kids home from school, even if school is open. But my worry is that the way the regulations are currently structured doesn't support that. So my hope would be that we get a good look at the guidance from the state and we see what the state's thought is on how they would handle that. And if the state overlooks that or it's not robust enough, I think we won't be alone in asking the state to relook at their guidance and make it more robust. How would we deliver that? That's a tough question. I think there's probably a couple of ways to think about it. One way is, in addition to there being students who may not return to school for whatever reason, there will likely be staff who, for whatever reason, are unable to return to school because it puts them at risk. It may be that we have a nice alignment between those staff who might need to work remotely and students who might want to learn remotely. I think that's more likely to match up at the elementary level than it is at the secondary level, where there is a lot more subject matter specificity and a lot less generalism than there is at the elementary level. And so we won't know how that looks until we're a little bit closer to the day. But I'm imagining that that might serve at least part of the need, and again, might sort of marry up two groups of people who both need special kinds of accommodations to be able to help one another. To your earlier point, we did get a lot of feedback from teachers on what the experience was like doing virtual learning this spring. The common themes over and over again were how hard that they were working, and I believe that to be absolutely true. And I do think Syosset teachers absolutely crushed it this spring. But they need better technology from us. They need better tools to work with. We've heard that loud and clear, and they're absolutely right. So we're in the process of trying to buy them better tools. We recognize that some of the time that they've had to invest was to build, to your earlier question, curriculum that doesn't exist for an online environment. So a lot of the curriculum work that we've been doing this summer is to develop curriculum for an online environment so that teachers aren't needlessly duplicating one another's effort. And just driving themselves to frustration in that process because they're always striving to do something excellent for students. Hopefully we can, with this 3-month ramp to the fall, it won't be perfect, but there will be a lot more in place than there would have been otherwise. And again, my hope is that we don't need to use a lot of the virtual work that we've done over the summer, but it's such a long lead time effort that if we didn't start it now, we wouldn't get it done in time. So it had to be undertaken. So I do think that if there are periods where we have to go all virtual because there's an outbreak locally, or maybe there's just an outbreak in our school district, that we'll be in a much better position to make that seamless switch virtually. Teachers will have better tools. We'll have given them more resources. But I also think that if we're back in a live or a hybrid environment, we also we'll be in a better position to do this work because we've had a lot more time to plan and ready up for it.
Right. I know we discussed earlier, different tech that would be needed to have that hybrid environment. Have we been able to advance that? And, do you see us being where we need to be come September?
We've put in a large order for laptops. We're looking for powerful laptops because one of the things that we heard is with so much video being managed that, and teachers still need to manage their virtual classrooms, and they need to be able to see students, work with those students. We heard from many of them about document cameras. These are like little overhead projectors that let you simulate really a chalkboard by writing on a pad and then having students be able to watch you write on that pad. Accomplishes the same thing. So we are purchasing those. We're in the process of waiting for delivery on those right now. And even if we don't have to go back into the virtual environment, giving our teachers better tools to work with is going to be a plus either way. So this is not a wasted investment, no matter which path we take.
Absolutely. And, the teachers did a great job. We asked them to do it on Chromebooks, which are fine for students who are doing learning and running one app at a time. But, like we've discussed, if they're running an entire classroom and the virtual learning and they're trying to stream and this, they need the power that they need to get their job done. So, I'm glad we're there to get them what they need. So thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Rogers, before I ask if there are any other questions regarding your superintendent's report, one of our board members got bounced out of a meeting and they're trying to rejoin. I'm not sure if you can help there.
Ms. Payne is managing the meeting, and hopefully she'll be able to.
They just have to return to the waiting room and I'll bring them back in, but I don't see them waiting right now.
Okay, so we're waiting still for one more, I think.
Yeah.
My count is correct.
Correct.
We're waiting for them to return to the meeting.
Yeah, they're trying and they're not being successful.
Okay.
So.
Dr. Rogers?
Yeah.
Well, we're waiting. And maybe it's later in the agenda and I missed it, but did we need to certify the vote tonight? I know prior we adopted the poll, not the polling, I'm drawing a blank on the term. The canvas.
The canvas.
Thank you. And then, you know, a month later we certify the vote. Is that tonight? Is that the next meeting?
That's tonight. It's item 14B10.
Still
Ms.
having
Frankel, I sent the link to Ms. Falco. She would check her email. She'll find it there.
It may be a Wi-Fi issue.
Maybe she could try to log in from her phone.
You know, let her know she can access this through the Zoom app on the phone.
Yep, we'll do.
There she is.
Got her? Okay, we're up and running again.
Great.
You're on mute, Susan.
I'm so sorry. The Wi-Fi died. So sorry.
No worries. We waited for you. So are there any other questions for Dr. Rogers with respect to the superintendent's report? Tom Rotolo.
Hi, Dr. Rogers. You had said that you met with the student leaders and you've gotten feedback from teachers. And I had brought this up a couple of times before, is that this is obviously all new ground for us. We're getting input from the parents, the students, the teachers. Again, I would like to capture that information versus everybody working in a bubble. I know that the teachers had really good feedback from the students in their individual classes on how they were learning and what they preferred, asynchronous, and they seem to have great feedback. So can we please capture the feedback that we're getting from the students in a main database, like we had said, where we had, I don't know, might need some work, where we had for the starts, the change of the school start time, where we have one location where we're getting the feedback. It's just you and Adele can view that information. Because obviously this is very valuable information, because this is the first time that we're going through this.
Yeah, our hope has been to do some sort of community engagement. We did meet with some leaders, PTA leaders, to walk them through where we stood and get some as a focus group from them, what they thought would be valuable in terms of engaging parents down the road when we were ready. And they all indicated that there was obviously a desire and an appetite to give us some feedback. I'll confess, I'm a little frustrated at the pace of getting the guidance from the state. At our last meeting, I told you that where I thought we would be right now is that we would have already digested all that guidance. We would have built our first draft of the plan, and the first draft of the plan would be out there for public comment. And I was anticipating that we would use that same tool from the start time discussion that we had, where we can get an awful lot of feedback very quickly, and then we can stratify it by roles, so students or teachers or parents. And in the absence of the guidance, my worry has been that we may present the public with options that aren't actually viable because they won't meet the guidance. And then, some people will fall in love with those options and then become frustrated because they were never viable to begin with. So my hope would be to get to a place where the guidance comes out soon. We can build either a preferred model and put it out there for public comment, or maybe one or two models that are possible within our physical plant. And there are going to be differences across the county because we're fairly full, as our buildings are fairly full. There are some other districts that have been experiencing enrollment declines, and they're just going to have more square footage to work with. So it's not going to look the same from district to district, but within our plant, I'm hoping that we can identify one, maybe two options that work, and then start to take some feedback on it. And again, the thing that's, at some point, we're going to have to get feedback from the public irrespective of it. And we may just get feedback from the public absent a plan and ask more generalized questions. So we've actually been looking at maybe a survey would be a more useful for that, since there's no plan to actually react to. But we're anxious to get that public feedback, and the limiting step right now is waiting for the guidance.
And I'm kind of looking at it from the point of view of the teachers had this real lived experience. The students have had this lived experience that's going on every day, and also the parents. So I'm kind of saying, can we capture this information? Because obviously this is now trial and error, and we don't want to waste that effort that we've already kind of rebuilding the wheel each time. But now having it kind of more real time, having the information consolidated, and this way we're making decisions based on data, and not, again, just trial and error. That's my point with this.
Yeah, we did, the PTA on its own initiative did some surveying back in the spring and shared that information with us. It was very useful. The Teachers Association has also done some surveying of their membership on their own initiative and have developed some very interesting data. We do have individual feedback from students. I can certainly see if the teachers themselves have collected some of that feedback from students. That might be useful, as well as we're in this design phase. And then ultimately, we do want to get a broader swath of the public to be able to weigh in.
Right, because we want to kind of include all the stakeholders, but not just so, since the information is kind of live and everybody's having a different experience, and we want to capture that.
Yep.
I had another question which related to, obviously now we're going into, we have many options. I can speak for a elementary school student. And again, for the teachers, I saw my elementary school teacher do a wonderful job. She really took the bull by the horn, but I saw just standing there and even being on this Zoom meeting, it's hard to manage all of these kids. So can we look at other options based, I know we have, you said there were 6 options or what it potentially could be, but on either the class size or when we break up the class size where we just don't have this many students to manage by just the teacher or the teacher and the assistant teacher, it's difficult to do.
Yeah, one of the things that we tried to implement in phase 3 was more small group work. The plus size is the classrooms are easier to manage. There's more individual attention for students. But if you break a class into 3 classes and each of those small groups gets 30 minutes, that's still 90 minutes of effort from the teacher. So it does chew up teachers' time very quickly to do those small groups. And in the end, we still have a finite staff. I do think that as we've been looking at ways we might repurpose staff, if it's necessary to do social distancing, there may be ways in which we currently use staff that we would choose to do differently in order to have more smaller groups, and maybe those staff members might rotate through the groups based on the roles that they play. So again, with more lead time, we have the ability to do, I think, better planning. And that's not a knock on the work we did this spring, kind of turning on a dime, but, we're going a little deeper and thinking a little bit more about it. When we did the small group work in phase 3, in the buildings that had permanent substitute teachers or, other staff that could serve a role to take some of those, the tutors could take some of those small groups, we tried to, use them as fully as we possibly could. And I think that will be, again, the model going into the fall if it's necessary. And I, of course, hope it's not. But if it's necessary to do virtual learning, then, we've learned a little bit from that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Rogers on the superintendent's report? Okay, we did receive audience to the public via email. Dr. Rogers, I think you've collated that.
I did. I captured the ones that came in by the deadline. Obviously, at some point, my attention has to turn towards the board meeting. So some of these are lengthy. I won't read them all, but I'll just do them thematically. And then what I'll do is I'll post these all online because I know that there were writers who had wanted to have all of their thoughts in public. So I think the best way to do that and be mindful of your time is to just post them on the website. So a question from parent writing, because I'm very concerned about the possibility that in September school will become part-time, staggered day, hybrid model, or worse, not yet open at all. She goes on to say that she's worried about excessive screen time. She's worried about remote learning, not moving her children along as quickly as they could be, physical and emotional effects of not being back in school with classmates, with other students, worry that half day and not alternate day is not adequate and certainly not comparable to a standard school day, worried that students who require special services, whether they're special ed services or some emotional support or the need to socialize with other students, that they're not able to take advantage of that. Worry that adults need the childcare so that they can return to work, and some sort of partial reopening may not work for them. And the hope that students could be with their parents more often. So that was her plea, and she ended with thank you, and I hope you have a nice summer, which I always appreciate. So thanks for that. And that was Ms. Wyman. Another is from Mr. Vogelman. He wrote that he lives in Woodbury, New York. He's writing in lieu of an in-person meeting. He has 3 questions. The first is, he's asking the board to put up for review the current school district policy as it relates to class size for K through 5. The current class size policy that the board has is 25 student maximum in grades K through 3 and 27 class size maximum in grades 4 and 5. He makes the point that students need more individualized attention for social and emotional well-being. He makes the point that because of the closure in the spring, students have not had as much learning as they would have had in person. He's observing a change in children's behavior that he feels may not be readily visible to the administration. And he concludes this, he has 3 questions. He concludes this question with, I know it's our collective priority as a community to ensure our children continue to get the education and support that they deserve. We know Syosset continues to be a leading district because you value the experience for our children and staff as well. What I'll do is, after I've gone through the letters, I'll go back and answer them thematically because there are a couple on this particular theme. Second question, do our administrators, including principals in each school, currently have online access to log into any live class that's being taught? The point being made that getting feedback on strengths and weaknesses has helped me to improve and excel throughout my career. And he analogizes to that for teachers in the online environment. Third question, as it relates to feedback on our initial foray into online learning and the new normal, I wanted to see if using the same word cloud survey product that was used by the district to get feedback on the school start time changes is being contemplated. And as I already said to Mr. Rotolo, the answer to that question is yes. And we're just waiting now for the governor to issue his guidance. Ms. Leslie Wan asked a similar question. She says a couple of months ago, I'm realizing that because there's so many of these questions, if I go back and answer them thematically, it's going to be hard to follow. So the first question is not for me, it's for the board, the current class size policy. The second question, do administrators have access to live classes? Yes, and administrators would log into those live classes frequently. We even developed a protocol for how to announce yourself when you arrived in a class so that the teachers and the students would know that the administrator, the building principal had arrived. And yes, we were trying to give feedback, but we were also trying to learn. And the third question, would we be surveying using thought exchange? The answer is that's our intention. Third writer, Ms. Leslie Wan. A couple of months ago, I learned that the 4th grade class at Walt Whitman will not have an integrated co-teaching class for this upcoming year. Is this consistent throughout all the elementary 4th grade classes? If not, how is this determined? What grade school would receive this instructional model? So as I mentioned to the board several months ago, as a part of our budget development process, we already have 1 integrated co-teaching class at either grade 3, 4, or 5 in each of the elementary schools. Our hope had been to go to a co-teaching class in each of those grades in all 7 elementary schools. So that would be a 3rd grade, a 4th grade, and a 5th grade co-teaching class. Because of the potential for mid-year budget cuts, because we cut about $4 million out of this coming year's budget, we were not able to realize that full plan. We did add 1 more co-teaching class at each of the elementary schools. We just didn't add 2, which had been our original hope. So every building will now have 2 integrated co-teaching classes, and the decision of where those classes will be is driven by student IEPs, their individualized education plan, which are requirements under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Law. So the integrated co-teaching class is a special education intervention. And so the location of the class, what grade it's in, is driven by the students in that grade whose IEPs represent the greatest need, because this is the most muscular intervention. So in some buildings, it may be 3rd and 4th grade. In other buildings, it might be 4th and 5th grade, but it's driven by the students' IEPs. Her second question, knowing that we're unsure what September will look like, how are teachers preparing and training for a potential year, month, or months of online learning? I think I covered that in my superintendent's report. Obviously, we're doing a lot of work. She is also asking the board to revisit the class size policy. Having 25 students in one class is too many students for teachers to educate our students effectively. Her fourth question, if it's not by keeping our class sizes currently, specifically the Walt Whitman 4th grade, may I ask how students will receive the support they deserve and need now more than ever? So this class size policy has been in place for a number of years. It's in place in other buildings. We have a lot of confidence in our Syosset teachers being able to teach within the class size constraints, and we've enjoyed a lot of success within the constraints that the board has given us. Mr. Kevin McKenna writes, at your last meeting, you discussed sending letters to Syosset Park LLC, the town of Oyster Bay, and DEC possibly. What was your decision? Who did you send correspondence to? Can you read the letters aloud at tonight's meeting? I won't read the letters aloud because they're posted on the district website. And as I said earlier, we sent 2 letters, one to the Nassau IDA about the tax implications for the Amazon site, the other to the town of Oyster Bay. And again, we sent them a letter and they sent us a response tonight. Both of those will be on the district's website. Our letter is already on the district's website. The town's response will be on the website tomorrow. Second is, I've sent you an email regarding what he calls sick out data, which I received via Freedom of Information from your FOIL officer. I've asked what your opinion is on the data comparing South Grove Elementary and Village School. So the FOIL request that he's referring to was a request for number of days of absence for teachers, staff, and students at the South Grove Elementary School and Village Elementary School. That data is available under the state's Freedom of Information law, and we've fulfilled that data request. We did look at the number of absences on a per pupil and per staff person basis and found the 2 buildings to be very comparable. And those are the emails that I got before I stopped looking at email and started meeting with you for our earlier meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. With respect to the first email that you had read about all of the concerns for the hybrid model and online learning and social and emotional health of the students. And I just want to say that I share all of those concerns with you, and I know that the administration and the teachers do as well. And I know that these are topics that are all being considered by the committees that are working on the reopening plan. So I just want to validate all your concerns and know that we are taking steps to do the best that we can to give all of the students a reopening experience and educational experience that the best that we can under whatever circumstances we're going to be given. And to the class size question, the policy committee had revisited that policy a number of years ago. If memory serves, initially it wasn't even a policy. I think it was something that was in practice as opposed to a policy. Am I right, Dr. Rogers?
It was actually a board resolution.
Okay.
That was not incorporated into policies, but it was a resolution passed by the board a number of years ago.
Right, and I think that when it was incorporated into a policy, the idea was that the administration, who's sort of in the field and is collecting data, would have some flexibility instead of hard and fast, rules in terms of class sizes and when to split. To Tom Rotolo's point and some of the points that were made in the emails, certainly online learning presents its own challenges, to class size. And I appreciate the experiments so far in terms of smaller class sizes. And I'm hopeful that we can arrive, if we need to, a good solution for online learning that utilizes some form of smaller class sizes or work groups in a way that makes sense for the teachers in terms of their time, but is addressing individual kids' needs. In terms of under normal circumstances, an in-person class, these sizes haven't proven to be inadequate in terms of the kids learning so far. We've, as Dr. Rogers said, have had success with these class sizes. So that's all I can, really comment on, but the policy committee certainly revisits policies every year. And the board is certainly welcome to, offer their opinions on revisiting this policy again. Tom Rotolo.
Yeah, so can I make a motion then that we at least revisit it and change, obviously in light of the new situation? Obviously, we have historical precedents, but that's completely changed now. So
Yeah, I don't think you need to make a motion for it. Your opinion is noted, and I'm sure that the rest of the board has opinions on that too that they can share. Andy.
Yeah, I know that, that's been the policy and with the class size and it's been successful in the past, but I know a lot of the audience to the public emails noted the current situation and how it's going just to make things even more difficult. And we all know all the myriad of reasons why, the kids are, some kids are possibly struggling and parents are concerned about where they'll be in the following school year. So maybe we could discuss possibly changing that for at least for now.
Chris, all right, did I see your hand?
Yes. Yeah, so I agree. I mean, given these circumstances, and I understand we have to have policies, we have to have a ceiling somewhere. But given what we've seen over the last year and the challenges the teachers face trying to remotely educate a large class is a very different experience than a small. I think we should look at it and talk about it, and whether it's, a change of class size issue, whether it's additional resources, et cetera, especially when we're back in that hybrid environment, or, God forbid we're closed again. It is a different experience than the regular classroom. And I think for normal times, this policy works, but I think it's something that we really have to look at hard, given these changing scenarios.
Krista Filippo?
Yeah, I foresee that if we do open in September, you can't physically put all those students in one class anyway. You're going to have to come up with some type of hybrid. And if you look to increase the amount of teachers with the potential of the financial impact to the district, you have to weigh that as well. Not too long ago, the board on the agenda looked to save a few pennies by eliminating LED signs. Now, what are you looking to do? Increase teachers, which is the highest cost labor of any budget? I think we have to do a wait and see what happens in September and then reevaluate it, rather than, make a decision based upon a flood of, similar emails circulated, in a rally type effort.
Anyone else care to speak on this?
I just wanted to make a comment that Chris DiFilippo was talking about. I'm pretty sure the board didn't eliminate the LED signs, just put it off for the time being. I think we all decided we would do it. Isn't that right?
Yeah, the board did decide to do the LED signs and just wanted to wait until we saw what kind of financial situation we were going to be in for the remainder of the year before going through with the actual purchase. But the board did approve the LED signs, and that still stands. Okay, so from what I'm hearing, sorry, Anna, go ahead.
I'm just curious. Question, Dr. Rogers. Across all elementaries, what is the class size we're talking about across all schools?
All schools have the same maximum, so it's 25 is K 1, 2, and 3, and 27 is 4 and 5. So what will happen is, if you have a large class or a class that's very close to, let's say there's 75 students in a grade, and to make the math work out easy, let's say it's a third grade, that would be 3 sections of 25. So that would exactly meet the class size. But if another child arrived, then that would exceed the class size because one class would be 26. So what would happen is we would break the class. Then the average class size would drop because now you're taking 76 kids and dividing it over 4 classes instead of taking 75 kids and dividing it over 3. So in that example, 76 divided by 4 would be 19. So the class size would drop to 19. So there's no, because the buildings are fairly small, there's no automatic class size. It really depends on just how many 4th graders happen to be in a given school or how many 3rd graders happen to be in a given school. So what we have always done as a district is when a class is very close to breaking, there's a large likelihood that a student will move in over the summer and break the class. And we've found that we have a lot better success when the earlier we hire teachers than the later we hire teachers. So, we will preemptively break classes when they're one student away so that we can hire in the spring, anticipating that that student is likely to show up over the summer anyway. But when classes are 4 or more students away from breaking, we have typically not preemptively broken them.
Okay, so I've heard enough interest, at least 5 people, including myself, that this is something that the board policy committee can discuss and revisit in light of the changes to all school district circumstances, and so we will. Okay, Dr. Rogers, did you finish going through the audience to the public?
I did.
Okay, very good. Okay, the discussion item listed on your agenda is the continued use of Native American team name and mascot. And that's on the agenda because we're living through a time of great reflection. Individuals and businesses and sports teams and athletes and your neighbors are now thinking long and hard about how their actions, words, and messaging affects others and what it is that they truly want to be known for. And when the board created its mission statement, the board decided what it wanted to be known for. And we explicitly said that Syosset will be known for students, staff, and parents who exemplify respect, integrity, dignity, and empathy, compassion and kindness to improve their communities and the lives of others, giving students a sense of safety and belonging and a community that supports its rich multicultural makeup. And the district has done an incredible amount of work to reach these goals of cultural diversity and competency with curriculum and character education efforts and other programming. We recently discussed ways in which the district intends to continue these educational efforts, and Dr. Rogers has indicated that he's speaking with students. Today, he's been speaking with students and in a diversity cabinet in order to improve those efforts as well. However, the most visible message we are sending out to the public about who we are is wholly averse to these goals and our mission. I'm specifically referring to our continued use of a Native American as our mascot, along with the moniker Braves, which refers to Native American warriors. It is not acceptable to appropriate a race in the name of history and tradition. I recently learned that in 2001, the State Education Commissioner asked local school districts to end the use of Native American mascots and team names. Commissioner Richard Mills concluded that Indian mascots and symbols can make the school environment seem less safe and supportive to some children, and may send an inappropriate message to children about what is or is not respectful behavior towards others. He stated, "I ask the boards to end the use of Native American mascots as soon as practical." Many districts have since then. In fact, in 2002, Newsday reported that Syosset School Board approved the change of the logo and the name to the Syosset Redhawks, since red-tailed hawks are native to Long Island. The district even held a community-wide contest for the new logo. I have no idea why the transition was never completed, but the reasons for the commissioner's requests and Syosset's decision to make the change are as warranted today as they were then. On June 25th of this year, an article in a Westchester newspaper reported that after a trustee brought up the issue of the mascot being divisive and not fostering an inclusive environment, the Board of Education voted to retire the Indians' name. In Michigan, a school retired its R-Skins mascot and selected the Red Wolves as its new mascot. In New Jersey and Connecticut, school boards retired the Indians as their mascots. I'm aware of the argument that the Braves name and mascot is intended to honor Native Americans. However, the level of activism by and on behalf of Native Americans shows us that it is not received as an honor. Days ago, when a Connecticut school retired the Indians' name and mascot, a tribal nation representative said, quote, "Supporters of Native-themed mascots argue that it evokes a sense of nostalgia from their days in school and believe such mascots are intended to honor Native Americans. Yet while we understand their sentiment, we do not feel honored. Native Americans are not mascots, nor should our cultures be misappropriated as such. Race or ethnic themed mascots or school nicknames perpetuate the stereotypes and racism that harm Native and non-Native students. When schools and sports teams use the term Indian as a team name, it implies Native people are of the past, as if we're artifacts, something that's extinct," end quote. There's a reason that as of 2001, more than 600 colleges and high schools had already changed their mascots, including St. John's, who changed their name from the Red Men to the Red Storm. There's a reason why journalists in the Native American community are being joined by the National Association of Black Journalists, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, the Asian American Journalists Association, and the Society of Professional Journalists to end the use of Native American names and mascots. Our students have periodically raised these same concerns over the years, and as discussions with our students continue in the wake of recent nationwide events, it is evident that Syosset Braves and the Native American mascot still evoke painful feelings. There is no reason why Syosset should have a name and mascot that is divisive and offensive. Tonight, I hope that we can discuss retiring the use of the Braves name and mascot and discuss beginning the work of determining a new name and mascot that the entire community and student body can be proud of. So I welcome other board members if they have any opinions on this issue. Anna?
When it comes to highly controversial issues such as this one, we as a board need to make sure that all and not some community members are represented and served. Whether or not the use of the Native American name and logo is offensive is nothing more than a matter of opinion. And as we know, opinions vary. In this case, the first opinion that should be considered is that of the 6 Native American families that live right here in Syosset. There's also something to be said about the value of tradition, history, and spirit. Syosset Braves have been an integral part of the Syosset culture for almost 60 years. Once a Brave, always a Brave means something to so many athletes, students, and families past and present. The name has been representative of only positive traits, such as fighting spirit, being brave, courageous, dedicated, and proud. Erasing or changing a long-standing tradition cannot be up to the 9 people on this board. 2 years ago, the students of Syosset voted against using the logo portion of it. The decision was not unanimous in the least, as it did not represent the entire student body. Nevertheless, a reasonable compromise was achieved. I think further changes should be up to the students and need to be conducted through an open, respectful, honest, and fair dialogue, as opposed to pushing a political agenda over few. Thank you.
Chris Ulrich?
Yeah, so I appreciate everybody's opinion, and everybody's entitled to an opinion and has an opinion. I hadn't considered this. I hadn't heard any concern in the community about this, so I started researching it and went online, did some searches. The Washington Post did several surveys of Native Americans, finding 9 in 10 Native Americans are not offended by the Redskins name, and even fewer are offended by names such as Braves, Warriors, etc. They repeated the survey 3 years later, same results. NBC talked about a poll, again, surveying Native Americans, 90% not offended. So if we have people in the community who are offended, it's something we should definitely discuss. But if it's just an issue or talking point as to whether we should change it, I don't see a reason, but I think we should engage the community. If the community is concerned, we should certainly engage any families who are Native American who do find this offensive. We've already changed the mascot as far as I know. We don't have any Indian symbols on our field or in the school that I'm aware of, unless I'm missing some. You know, we've adopted the big S, you know, but we do still call ourselves the Braves. That said, Long Island has a rich history with Native American tribes. I believe there were 13 tribes originally. And if we're going to start renaming things, we're going to have to rename Syosset High School because that's an Indian term. Canarsie, Rockaway, Matinacock, Merrick, Massapequa, Nessaquag, Setauket, Patchogue, Shinnecock, Manhasset, Montauk, and a few others that I'm going to get tongue-tied on are all tribes that regions have been named after, schools have been named after, teams have been named for. So where do we draw the line? Where do we stop? You know, how far are we going to take it? Again, I'm not Native American. If there are people in the community who are offended, I'd certainly want to know and talk to them and discuss the issue. But just as an issue that's out there, you know, the mascot was changed, the symbol was changed, and the Braves name, it's, if anything, it's a positive message, and it's deeply entrenched in the tradition of our schools and our district.
Rob?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of opinions on this, and I can see both ends of the arguments on here. I understand that Syosset has a long history of having this mascot, and there are parents who have children here, parents who attended Syosset High School, and I respect that. However, we also do have to consider the changing times where we are, and you know, sometimes you get to a certain point in history where you realize that what you were doing in the past really was not okay. And I think that this is one of those situations. It was mentioned here that we have Native American families here living in Syosset, or at least people who have who are descendants of Native Americans. And you know, you need to consider that these people, these students, and these families who go here and who are in our schools have to see and live with a mascot that's based on their race. I mean, just substitute any other race, take away, you know, if it wasn't Native Americans, white people, Black people, Asian people, Latino people. I mean, you couldn't really fathom a situation where we would call the Syosset, you know, insert any race's name there. It just doesn't really make any sense in light of what's going on here in 2020. The National Congress of American Indians, if you go to their website, they have a lot of data there. They have a lot of articles, and they are, it's not a question with them. They are very certain that they don't consider the use of Braves, Redskins, Indians, they don't consider it an honor. They find that it's intolerant, and they feel that these caricatures and stereotypes, I'm reading directly from their site here. It says here, these caricatures and stereotypes are harmful, perpetuate negative stereotypes of America's first peoples, and contribute to a disregard for the personhood of Native peoples. I think that we need to seriously consider abandoning our use of the name Braves. Incidentally, I did a little research with the help of our newest board member, Susan Falcove, and she pointed out that and I was not aware of this either. I just assumed that Syosset, that the name Syosset had Native American origins, but it turns out it's actually Dutch. It's my opinion that we've already waited too long and it's time for a change.
Chris DiFilippo, did I see your hand? You're on mute, I think.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I did a little research of my own. I think, well, for a couple of things. One is, I'm not sure why this rose to the top level with all the priorities we have going on in the district, but that being said and it being on the agenda, I think it needs to be opened up to the community. I think before any quick decision is made, either this month or next month, that, you know, we poll the community like we normally do and get the feedback from, and, you know, let the majority rule. So coming from Native Indians, the terminology chiefs, redskins are antiquated terms. Many sports teams, including the Redskins and local school districts, confuse the idea of honoring Native people by naming their teams after them by using racist, hateful, and stereotypical imaginary and names such as Redskins was used as a term that referred to bounties on Native Indians' scalps. It is different from places named because before the colonists, Native Indians people gave these places Indian names for their purposes and utilities, while they would never call themselves Redskin or Brave, for example. So, you know, we all need to take a look at that. I think additionally, a lot of people don't realize it, but the fire departments need to take a look at it too, because, you know, the top people, they call them chiefs. So, you know, it's definitely something that should be changed, and perhaps we could look at calling, instead of calling it the Braves, we name it after an animal. Right now, you know, lion or tiger or something along that category. But, you know, there'll be a process for that too if we get to that level. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Susan?
Hi, so I wanted to say it was the Oyster Bay Historic Society believes that the Syosset origin is in Dutch. So anybody who wants to look it up can look at the Oyster Bay Historic Society. But additionally, I wanted to say that the topic of changing the school mascot is certainly an emotional one. And it's my understanding that the Native Americans have fought for years to have these types of mascots removed because they find them offensive. The efforts have largely been successful. Many schools at all levels have removed these type of mascots. In addition, in 2005, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, which is the governing body of college athletics, banned the use of Native American names, logos, and mascots during its championship tournaments. And in 2005, the American Psychological Association called for the immediate retirement of all Native American mascots, symbols, images, and personality by schools, colleges, universities, athletic teams, and organizations. The organization based its decision on the body of social science and literature that shows that harmful effects of racial stereotyping and inaccurate racial portrayals. As the National Congress of American Indians stated, at the end of the day, there's no excuse for cultural stereotypes that degrade, slander, mock, or belittle Native American people. After seeing the overwhelming evidence indicating the significant harm that can be caused by these mascots, something we need to reconsider. It is of the utmost importance that we be respectful of all of the people in our community, and that's what our mascot should represent. And that's who Syosset is. And that's the example that we should, as a community, set for our kids.
Thank you, Susan. I saw another hand before. Was it Carol's? Yes.
Okay. I know this has been a discussion for a few years, as Tracy stated, and back in 2002, and it was on the or 2001 on Newsday. And I mostly agree with what board members have discussed so far. But at this point, I do not feel comfortable just for the board to make a decision on such a big, a big item. And I do think that I've lived in Syosset for 18 years, and then my kids have been doing sports since they were in elementary school, and I've known they are proud of being a Brave in Syosset. So I do think that we should engage the community when it comes to decisions such as this. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Andy?
Yeah, I want to go back, what Tracy would originally said. It certainly seems incongruous with our stated missions for the school district and for the community. I also started looking into this, and I did see the numerous organizations, religious groups, the National Congress of American Indians that asked for these mascots and names not to be used. I know the state of Maine outlawed it, but I also, I know there's also polls. I know, Chris, you mentioned polls. I saw polls that said that the results showed that Native Americans weren't bothered by it, but then I saw polls that said they were. So, what I did was I asked the one resident that I know that's of Cherokee descent what he thought, and he said he wasn't offended by it at all. So I think you're going to find two sides, but I definitely see the point that a lot of the board trustees have made in that this seems incongruous with our stated mission and stated goals. And as Rob mentioned, we wouldn't have a name that might be denigrating to any other group. So why do we have this name? When I had a question maybe for all of us, do they differentiate between the name and the mascot? In other words, in all these studies and all these discussions, okay, so there's the name, and there's some schools have a name that might be Brave or Indian, but they don't have a mascot. Aren't those two different things? Isn't that right?
The name and the mascot, obviously one is a name and one is a mascot. Right. I don't know that you can separate certain names and mascots. For example, if you had the name Braves, but your mascot was the Bulldog, are you the Bulldogs or are you the Braves? And if you're the Braves, Brave is different than Braves. So once you add the plural, you're talking about and referencing Native American warriors. If you're talking Brave, like if you had a motto, Syosset home of the brave, that's not referencing Native Americans. That's referencing, just the aspect of being brave. Which if it's something that is, very important to Syosset, one might consider, a motto with the word brave in it. But once you say Braves, you are referring to Native Americans. And so while there is, a name and a mascot, they, depending on what the name and mascot is, they could both be referencing Native Americans, not necessarily attributes.
Right. It's possible to have a name, but not a mascot. Isn't that right?
Yes, that is right.
Okay. So I kind of agree with Carol. I just started looking into this, and I know there's two viewpoints, and I do recognize both of them. I certainly want to discuss this more, but I certainly recognize how this could be offensive to American Indians, indigenous peoples. So I'd want to definitely continue to discuss it.
Thank you, Andy. Just to note, we do have several mascot depictions still within our walls and also on at least one of the Syosset school boards for scoreboards rather. In addition, our teams oftentimes wear uniforms that have the depiction of the mascot on it. Mostly, practice uniforms. And I know that with a lot of the fundraisers that Syosset's, PTA or booster clubs put out there, the mascot is still on it. So it's still in use today. It may not be everywhere, but it's certainly present, and students have, even recently, made us aware that it is painful, not just for Native American students, but for other students as well. And so I think my point just is, there are certainly mascots out there that everybody could get behind, that wouldn't be offensive to anybody. And I feel like a mascot that everyone can get behind and unify with would be beneficial to the school. If we already know that this has been divisive for years, why would we continue that? Chris Ulrich?
Yeah, so just to clarify the point from earlier that I made about the Syosset name, and just to clarify, because I think some people want to go down a slippery slope here, and we're going to open up a lot of floodgates on different issues. According to the New York Times, the Matinacock Indians once hunted in the wooded hills and vales of Syosset, but sold the lands to an Englishman. The name Syosset is derived from the Matinacock word meaning the place in the pines. And by the mid-18th century, the Dutch farmers cleared some of the woods for their fields. So while the Dutch did create the hamlet, we're not a village, we're a hamlet, it is Native American term. And again, as we go down this path, what are we going to need to address, and what else are we going to need to change? If there's people in the community who are genuinely offended, I would certainly like to talk to them. Those people who are in the community who are impacted by this. But, I hope we're not putting 6 families on the spot for a topic that's not a concern that they're raising, because there's an issue to be advanced. And then once we do that, given the history of the name and where the name came from, do we need to change the name of the Syosset schools? Should we change the name of the community? It just starts opening up Pandora's box and things start flooding. We did abandon the Mascot early 2000, 2001, 2002. Our mascot, or our symbol, is now the letter S for Syosset. So for those who are genuinely impacted, I would love to hear from. If there's a few students who weren't Native American who were offended by it, they're absolutely entitled to their opinion, but so is everybody else. And I think, as somebody else had said, it does need to be in part a community decision. It's not just, something that we should be deciding that was raised 18 years ago.
Anyone else would like to speak on this topic? Okay, thank you very much for having this discussion. I know it wasn't easy for anybody. It's an emotional topic for many, so I really appreciate that. There's no unfinished business, and the following items are new business. A1 items is the approval of staff changes for certified staff. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A2 is the approval of 2020-2021 stipends and hourly rate activities. May I have a motion, please? Carol, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A3 is the approval of a memorandum of agreement between the Syosset Central School District and Syosset Teachers Association concerning summer school teaching personnel. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Andy. Are there any questions? Chris Ulrich, your screen has a bright square over it. I don't know what that means, but all of a sudden that's maybe a movement.
I don't see anything.
Now I see it. Okay, so it's usually when someone speaks, but this time Chris wasn't speaking and it went around his square.
No,
Okay,
and I'm muted, so.
as long as I'm not missing anything. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B items. B1 is the recommendations of the committees on special education. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Christopher DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B2 is the recommendation of the committees on preschool special education. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B3 is the appointment to the Committee on Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B4 is the appointment to a Section 504 committee. May I have a motion? Anna Levitan, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B5 is the appointment to the building subcommittees on special education. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Mr. Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B6 is the appointment to the Committee on Preschool Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B7 is the acceptance of the district-wide school safety team. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B8 is the approval of the destruction of May 21, 2019 cast ballots. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B9 is the appointment of a board of registration for 2020-2021. May I have a motion, please? Carol Chang, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions? Tom Rotolo.
So my questions was my email that I had sent to Dr. Rogers and the board, where I was concerned about the envelope size and having voided ballots. I'd like to understand, I still don't understand the process for that and why people's votes weren't counted.
Is that question for B9, the appointment of a board of registration, or is that for an item that's coming later?
I'm sorry. Did you say B9? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I
B10.
think B10 is what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So we'll move on for questions and we'll come back to you. Are there any questions for B9? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, B10 is the certification of the vote from 2020. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Andy Feldman. Are there any questions, Mr. Rotolo?
Yeah, so I have a series of questions, which was, we had taken a vote on this last meeting, but then I'm not sure if that counted or not. Then my question was that I had sent an email to Dr. Rogers and the board addressing my concerns with the envelope size and the number of voided ballots. And I wanted to make sure that why that was, and I still didn't get an explanation.
Sure. Last month, the agenda was printed incorrectly in terms of whether it was an acceptance of the vote or a certification of the vote. I think it had both, but really, and that was corrected at the meeting, it was only intended to be an acceptance of the vote tallies as given that at the meeting, and that we would wait a month for the certification, which is what is on the agenda for today. So they were actually two different items, but Dr. Rogers, you can handle the rest of that question.
Sure. So little bit of an overview. The conduct of the vote is done every year by the Office of the District Clerk, in our case, Ms. Benjamin. This year's election obviously was like no other because it was conducted entirely by absentee ballot. We have done absentee ballots in the past. We do absentee ballots every year. And so the process for printing envelopes, et cetera, for absentee ballots is fairly familiar to us. This year, because the governor waited so long to make the decision to do the election by absentee ballot, there was certainly a compressed time frame and a lot of pressure on printers in order to get the process completed. But Ms. Benjamin, I think, did extraordinary work trying to pull this together under a lot of pressure and a lot of time constraints. One of the things that Ms. Benjamin did was consult frequently with Mr. Gross, who's on the meeting, with his partner, Neil Block. Neil Block is the attorney in the firm, who is their lead attorney for all election-related matters. And my understanding in talking to Neil is that Ms. Benjamin was one of his most frequent callers to make sure that the district was doing everything perfectly, given the unusual nature of the vote. And it's also my understanding from talking to Mr. Block that a number of Ms. Benjamin's questions to him resulted in firm memos to all of their clients because she would raise concerns or questions, and the firm would realize that these would be questions that would probably be common to all districts. That said, the absentee ballot process is not without its challenges, and we certainly managed it as best we could given the challenges that arose. There were ballots that were not counted, and the firm sent out, and I shared with the board, a guidance memo that was put together by the firm illustrating what ballots must be voided because they would not, they don't meet the test, some of it's statutory, for what counts as a valid ballot. So for example, if a ballot arrives and it is unsealed, then it is impossible to determine who put the ballot inside the envelope. If the ballot arrives and there is no signature on it, then the voter has not done the attestation, and therefore the ballot cannot be counted. So there's a series of reasons by which a ballot would be rendered void, and the staff that is employed by Ms. Benjamin receives the ballots, scans them in, organizes them, counts them. We're required by law to prepare a poll list. So when that happens in person, people sign into a book, and then we use an electronic barcoding device to register that Tom Rogers has showed up and voted on Tuesday, and then that is compiled with everyone else. For this exercise, the poll list was developed by taking the envelopes and then again using the barcode to scan the list of names so that we have a sense of the ballots that were had. Some ballots were invalidated upon opening because if there are stray marks on the ballots or writing on the ballots, they're invalidated. So there's a whole list of reasons that can invalidate ballots. There were a number of ballots that were invalidated, and all of that happens under the supervision of the district clerk and of the chief election inspectors. And on the day that the canvass takes place, and the canvass took place over 2 days because of the volume of ballots that we had, candidates or their representatives are welcome to come and observe as much or as little of the canvass as they want. We made opportunities available. It took 3 rooms to count them all. So we had space in each of the 3 rooms. 2 candidates did arrive and spend some time observing the canvas. And then we also live streamed the canvas from all 3 rooms on district live, same as we're live streaming the board meeting. So I don't know if that answers all of your questions. The memo that I shared with the board lays out the rules for what does and doesn't count as a valid ballot. The envelope size, that was all determined in working with the printers and trying to be as close to what we've done in previous years with absentee ballots as possible. And I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Yes. So in my own case, I received the ballot. I received the oath envelope, and I received the envelope that they all go into. When I tried to put the ballot into the oath envelope, it did not fit. And it didn't fit without me basically almost opening the envelope and resealing the whole thing. So I don't know if my vote counted. It was definitely an issue with the size of the envelope, which had nothing to do with me or any other of the voters. I tried for at least 20 minutes to get the envelope inside and sealed. So now again, if the ballot doesn't fit into the oath envelope and then that's sent in and it either opens because the envelope is the wrong size, or that somebody just said, well, I can't fit it in there, I'm just going to take both and I'm going to put it in the envelope and send it in, I consider that an error, and I consider that no fault of myself or of any of the other voters. And why should voters be disenfranchised if the envelope size is wrong and we can't get the ballot into the oath envelope?
So the rules for what ballots are voided and invalidated come from the attorneys. Anticipating that this might be a question, I asked Mr. Gross if he would participate in the meeting tonight. I'll let him walk us through their memo or their rationale for what does and doesn't count. But this is not something that's discretionary to the district. This is something that's given to us by the firm, and we just execute on the instructions that they give us.
John?
Yes, I'm unmuting. I think we ought to just spend a couple of minutes on context. During the pandemic, I think most of you have seen that we've issued in the space of 3 months, something like 55 writings, opinion letters, and e-blasts on various topics, all of which has been driven in large measure by the fact that a lot of these rules have been established by the issuance of executive orders by the governor. And very often those executive orders are 1 or 2 lines that replace volumes of existing law. So the task of interpreting that has been somewhat problematic, not only for us, but for our clients. In the case of the election, Governor Cuomo decided to abandon the traditional methodology for school district votes, which, as we all know, is utilization of machines, either owned by the district or rented from the county. There's specific provisions in the education law indicating that the county is supposed to make available, if they're not being used for a county election, machines by school districts. And of course, we've moved from the old-fashioned lever ones to ones where sheets are inserted. And apparently the primary motivation for that, which was I suppose, a very appropriate motivation, was the avoidance of crowds and the spread of the COVID virus when people show up at voting places in large numbers. So as an expedient, the governor simply and I'm not saying the governor himself, I'm sure one of his advisors or attorneys said, okay, what we have available are the rules for absentee ballots. So the issuance of the executive order said, okay, no more machine votes. And I'm directing you to send out scores of thousands of ballots to every resident in the community, which has caused enormous problems. We've had some school districts that were, in following that directive, the location or the source of information on who is a voter within a school district, a registered voter or qualified voter, is the county lists, which we get from the County Board of Elections. There was terrible mistakes. There were some school districts that were given lists that included halves of other districts, adjacent districts. And the rules for absentee ballots, and I'm trying to get to your point, Tom, ultimately, but I think this background's important. The rules of absentee ballots were developed on a very low scale, a couple hundred absentee ballots, if that many are applied for in a typical school district election, and because someone has a health problem remaining at home in a traditional setting, or someone who is away on vacation or away for business purposes, you make an application. There's an orderly process. So what school districts were confronted with across New York State is this order by the governor engrafting a whole existing system by utilization of absentee ballot rules that were limited to a very small number of voters in a traditional setting. And there are a whole series of commissioner decisions over the years that we research. There are some statutory provisions as well that very carefully and explicitly, and let's take, for example, the issue you raised about the inability to seal the envelope. Now, it very well may have been that the envelope was too small or the ballot was too big in your instance. Unfortunately, the statute says if you receive a ballot that's unsealed or where the oath envelope is inside the outside envelope separately from the ballot, it's not to be counted. And I can't recall at this hour, frankly, whether it was that's a specific statutory provision or a case law decision. I believe it's a statutory provision. So that caused, as Tom indicated, the disallowance of those ballots where the oath envelope was unsealed. And he pointed out the other instances. There are commissioner decisions that deal with if somebody checks 2 boxes on a proposition precluding utilization of that ballot, but allowing utilization of the ballot for the purpose of recording votes for election of persons running for office. But again, that was designed for a very small population. We now had this applied to 20,000. I think that was how many Syosset had to send out. And because of that great number, we prepared this memorandum as best we could based on statute and case law, setting forth what seemed to be arcane rules and don't make a hell of a lot of sense to somebody who wants their ballot counted. The primary reason for all of those rules is the avoidance of fraud. Now, when you are dealing with 200 absentee ballots, easy determinations. When you're dealing with 20,000 ballots, it's almost impossible to make a independent subjective determination as to what ought to be counted, where there's an express rule that simply says, ain't sealed, don't count it. So our list was pretty specific to the district, your district clerk, and frankly, we represent 55 school districts, all 55 school districts. I asked among our attorneys how many school districts had issues regarding unsealed ballots, and I think out of our 55, we had 7, and our advice was consistent: you can't count those ballots. Whether they fit in the envelope, didn't fit in the envelope, who screwed up in not having a big enough envelope or too big a ballot, was that a screw up? Did the printer do it? The fact remains the rule says you can't count it. So, and I know I'm only dealing with that one issue. There are all sorts of other issues that disqualified ballots. Fran then and her associates applying these specific objective rules deposited them into different piles, the ones that weren't counted. They all exist currently. They're in a sealed container. And the education law says they can only be opened for review by order of the Commissioner of Education. There's no discretion in terms of the board. The only time the board has discretion regarding these paper ballots is after 6 months, the board can take a vote not to open them for inspection, but to destroy them. So the only way one gets to inspect, and I know that was another question that's been, that Tom indicated has been raised. How do you get to look at these ballots? The only way is by filing a petition with the Commissioner of Education under Section 310 of the Education Law, saying this is what went on, we think something's wrong with it, we want to be able to look at the ballots. Which, interestingly, if you contrast that with the rules that existed where you have machine voting, the machines are owned by the county. The county has a separate rule, Nassau and Suffolk, just about every county in the state. They preserve the machine for 30 days, and they would allow people to come in and check the tallies in the back of the machine. Under the Ed law, when you're dealing with absentee paper ballots, Section 2034, subdivision 6 of the Ed law expressly says the only time that box that Fran has created with all these ballots can be opened is pursuant to the order of the commissioner. And, you know, it doesn't, and I realize it's frustrating, doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. It's really a product of the executive branch of the state of New York looking for a system to engraft and allow votes to be by ballot. They turn to the existing absentee, as I said, the absentee rules, and those are the rules. I hope that answers it, and I think in large measure, it grew out of that decision by the executive branch to utilize the existing relatively tough rules for a couple hundred absentee ballots now that are going to be used for 20,000 ballots. That's the problem.
So with all that said, and I'm not even going, since this is a new process, this is uncharted territory. They can't anticipate every situation. How many school districts did you have that the envelope didn't fit?
I don't know of any. This is the first time I've heard that.
Right. So even though you guys wrote the memo and you're going by the rules, which now is kind of the transitive property of your interpretation, we still don't, this is a unique situation. The envelopes don't fit. Now we're not counting them. The fact that the governor or you guys have made a determination, I still don't think we should disenfranchise voters because of an unforeseen situation that nobody really understands or anticipated.
Well, there's a way to remedy that. And the remedy is the filing of a petition with the commissioner.
Yeah.
Under the education law, the Board of Education, fortunately or unfortunately, doesn't have the authority to open that. I'm talking about box. I don't know what facility it's in. The Commissioner of Education does. Section 310 is a petition that gets filed. You have 30 days from the date of the determination to file. It goes to the commissioner. We as counsel would respond very factually as to, and I, of course, again, because this is really the first time I've heard about the lack of size issue, talk to Fran. We would submit an affidavit as to the basis of that determination based on our advice that says if it doesn't come back in that oath envelope, you don't count it. Maybe the commissioner would be persuaded to say, okay, go ahead, open up the box, count up the number of disqualified ballots, and he might make a judgment. Forgive me, she might make a judgment on it. But part of our job is not, where the law is pretty clear, black and white. For example, on this petition and opening up review to open up the boxes for review, we have to tell you what the law is, and the law is that the only person in the world who can direct that is the Commissioner of Education. So that is your avenue for relief.
Right. And I think as the board, as the school board representing the community, we have a responsibility to make sure that no one was disenfranchised and that everybody's vote who should counted.
Well, again, Tom, and not to belabor the point or argue the point, and I understand your frustration about the size of the ballot in the paper. I don't know if that was universal in Syosset, but the board is without authority. The ed law establishes that the district clerk runs the election, not the board. And the board has no independent jurisdiction to make rules contrary to existing black and white rules, even as unfortunate and frustrating as I understand you feel about this particular matter. The proper forum for raising that issue is the commissioner.
Okay.
Are there other questions regarding B10? Chris Ulrich.
So John, following up, I understand the rules that were laid out, and if an envelope's in this condition, if the ballot's in or out or etc., hard and fast rules. And I get that. But the fact is the ballots were constructed wrong. I had the same issue. I had to fold my flap a 1/4 inch over and the glue seal barely touched the envelope. So I honestly don't even know if my ballot was one of the ones discarded, and I'm on the board, right? So if the ballots were constructed wrong, I see that as our fault. We're the district. We produce and send them out. Now I know we use a printer, right? We delegate that responsibility to a printer, but that's still our responsibility to get votes out to people who are entitled to vote. And it sounds like we sent out ballots that would be void once it gets in the person's hands, because if they couldn't fit it back in the envelope, they never had a chance to cast a vote. And I think that is disenfranchising, the community. Now, what percentage of people didn't get counted? I know we had a certain number counted and a certain number received. Do we know how many weren't counted and what percentage of the voting base that was?
Yeah.
How big of an impact was it?
Before the second part of that answer, I think the first part requires a response. Number one, I don't know the degree to which the oversized ballot was at issue. I don't know if it was pervasive among 20,000 or not. Number two, lawyers are, as you know, Chris, officers of the court.
Of course.
So if a petition, which means we have an obligation to the truth, if a petition were filed, and if indeed we had knowledge of the number of oversized ballots, we would have to, in an affidavit in response to a petition, say the truth. Now, again, I'm begging the question a bit because I don't know the extent to which this oversized ballot issue existed. And that would be an affidavit by Fran. And the numbers, which I don't have right at hand, would also have to be revealed to the commissioner. And then argument would be made by the proponent of the petition that based on these facts, we think that there was disenfranchisement of so many voters, and the vote was X, Y, or Z in terms of numbers. We think, Commissioner, you should order a new election or a recount or whatever. That would be the process, and that's the appropriate process. I can say with certainty that this board does not have the authority to correct what you perceive, and Tom perhaps perceives as an error. Okay.
Oh, I agree with you. I totally agree. You know, it's something that has to go through the commissioner, and I understand that. But I'm just trying to ascertain, you know, what percentage of the public was excluded. And when we got these ballots back and we had to sign the ballots, were the signatures validated? I know at the elections you have the signature book and you compare signatures, because we know, everybody has heard, you know, ballots went to people who have moved away. Ballots went to people's houses who don't live there anymore. So do we know who is casting the ballots? Do we know who is signing the envelopes? And are we actually comparing it to the voter rolls? Or is that another area where we just don't know?
No, that we do know. The ballots were compared to the county lists that were provided to the school district, and that was pursuant to SED
But did we compare the signature on the affidavit to the signature in the book to see if it's the same person? Or was it just John Smith, 123 Maple Street? They're on the rolls, but we're not actually comparing the affidavit signature to the signature on file to see if it is the right voter.
I believe it was just compared to the list, but Fran, there wasn't a comparison of actual signatures.
Sorry about that. There's no signatures in the bold book either. We don't compare it, but we did have situations where you can see that the signature did not match the name that was printed on the oath envelope, and we would pull that.
Yeah, and frankly, if that were required, then I think we have about 750 probably invalid elections in the state of New York, because all school districts were comparing based on names on the county rolls that were provided by the various counties to the name listed. And I guess what Fran is indicating is if it said John Grozz clearly, and it was on the list John Gross, it wouldn't be counted. Those judgments were made. But I must tell you, and again, we're operating in the world of expediency, right? That this election was done on this paper ballot system. The major source, the primary source of veracity of the ballot is the county list. And there were problems with the county list, but they were straightened out. There were initially problems. So other than that as an answer, from the perspective of Fran, who did do a Herculean job, as did a lot of most all district clerks on Long Island. It was just incredible.
Oh, and please, to Fran, don't take it as any doubt or criticism of you. We saw you on the live stream. You did an amazing job. But in this election, the system was broken. The county put out lists that had voters who weren't eligible to vote.
Correct.
There were mistakes after mistakes. We had ballots that didn't fit envelopes. And how many of those? I don't know. I've heard from several people. I experienced it myself. So how big do these errors compile up? Maybe that's for the commissioner to determine.
It is. And also, not to get too legal process issue, that is the proponent of the petition has the burden of demonstrating how pervasive the problem was. So I don't want to mislead you. Just don't simply say we think there's a problem. There is a responsibility of the petitioner to identify with a degree of exactitude, the extent of the problem, which is a burden. There's no question.
Right.
It's not simply making the allegation. But and again, this was a decision made sometime, I think, in April, by the commissioner. I mean, it's an expedient decision because of the presence of the virus, and not defending it one way or the other, but motivationally, this was to try to staunch the spread of the virus. Because I've been doing this for quite a number of years at scores of board elections, and there are gabs of people present, and that was the motivation. And it was a simple looking for a panacea. They grabbed the absentee ballot system, and that's what was chosen.
Right.
Rob?
Yeah, I just want to bring up a couple of points that I find perplexing. In the last two elections prior to this year, where the margin of victory was very small, I think single digits perhaps was it last in each one, there were lots of absentee ballots in those elections that were similarly discounted for the reasons we heard today. But I didn't hear any of this talk about, questioning the results last year or the year before. Also, something to consider is, if I'm not mistaken, when the ballots are discounted, they're discounted prior to seeing who the person voted for. So it's not as if any particular candidate is prejudiced. It's a matter of vote integrity and discounting envelopes that are invalid. For all we know, all of our votes were invalidated, but we'll never know that. And it's just, the randomness of it. There were thousands and thousands, this was either the largest or the second largest turnout in our history here at Syosset in terms of the vote. Thousands and thousands of ballots came in envelopes and were just fine. So, if there were some envelopes that were too small, I suppose it's certainly possible. I imagine they were all produced at the same place and they were all the same size. So I'm not really sure how that occurred. I understand it's a possibility, but it just, the results are what they are. It's every year, we have close elections, and you get people on this board, they're board members. Everybody is equal here. Everybody has an equal say. Everybody has a vote. That's just the way it is. We should accept the results and move on and focus on the year ahead. Thank you.
With all respect, Rob, I disagree. It's not about the outcome. It's about the community and voter disenfranchisement, right? Fran may know how many votes weren't counted. I don't know if we can publicly say, but in the normal vote over the last many years, maybe there were 5 or 10 or 20 absentee votes. Maybe there were 3 or 4 that were irregular and not counted. And when the votes were close, yes, things were re-examined, and the other ballots that people cast when they don't show up in the book, I'm drawing a blank on the term, those are inspected and everything is scrutinized. But this year was different. This year, I think the numbers are very significant. I think we have a very significant number of voters who are disenfranchised. Would the result change? Not likely, but that doesn't mean people's votes don't count and shouldn't count. And the fact that a mistake was made, whether it was by the printer, whether it was their folding machine on the way they folded the ballots, that the ballots didn't fit in, so people put it alongside and now their vote doesn't count, that's not their fault, okay? That's the district's job to run the election. And I'm not saying anybody did anything intentionally wrong at all, but the fact is, if we mail out ballots and these go through the folding machine crooked and they don't fit in the envelope, so people sign the envelope and put it alongside in the outer envelope because that's the only way it fits, and their vote is now automatically void because it didn't fit, that's an issue. That's a problem. And we should be concerned about the voters. Is the outcome going to change? Not likely. But should people's votes count? Absolutely. And we shouldn't be dismissive.
Are there any other questions on item B10? Okay, all in favor of certifying the vote? All opposed? Any abstentions? C items. C1 is the authorization of service contracts. May I have a motion, please? Anyone? Andy Feldman, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C2 is the authorization for special education and/or nursing contracts. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C3 is the authorization for participation in the Nassau County Director of Schools Facilities Purchasing Consortium. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Christopher DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C4 is the authorization to enter into amendments to license agreements and other agreements with Apple Inc. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C5 is the authorization to enter into agreements for transportation contracts for field trips and other individual events. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Rob Gershon. Are there any questions? All in favor? Oh, sorry, Chris Ulrich, did you have a question?
Yeah, is this just a blanket rate agreement, or have we contracted for specific events, and what happens if those events are canceled or postponed because of COVID?
Great. I know Dr. Rufo was hoping she would get a chance to address the board this evening, and your time has finally come.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. This gives authorization for the transportation supervisor to enter into agreements. Typically, we operate via bids, but there are some times where an event has happened or a trip happens to happen before a board meeting. So this gives her the ability to enter into those agreements so that events or trips can happen. So it's nothing specific to answer your question at this time.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C6 is the award of Nassau County Director of Schools Facilities Purchasing Consortium cooperative bids. May I have a motion, please? Christopher DiFilippo, seconded by Tom Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C7 and C8 can be taken together. They are the authorization to participate in cooperative purchasing regarding information technology products. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Anna Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C9 is the authorization to standardize purchases. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C10 is the authorization for board members, superintendent, and designated staff to attend conferences and meetings. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C11 is the authorization for change order for work at South Grove. May I have a motion, please? Anna Levitan, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C12 is the authorization of agreement with Scope Education Services. May I have a motion, please? Tom Rotolo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C13 is the authorization for intermunicipal cooperation agreements. May I have a motion, please? Andy Feldman, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thanks for everybody for attending. Thank you, John Gross, for attending our meeting in person tonight. And thank you to all of the board members for a great meeting.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.